Good morning, everyone. We're trying for another time here. Had a keyboard error, so try to fix that. Um, I had some questions the other day about WX Manager classes and mobile programming. The mobile programming is different than Windev or WebDev, as is it doesn't run on Windows. Obviously, it runs on either Android or iOS. That's number one, or Windows Mobile. But we got to understand that there's a little bit of difference in the thought processes you should have for mobile versus a desktop environment. A desktop environment or a web environment can have direct access to the database, which means that if you're in HFS SQL or MS SQL or Postgres or whatever flavor database is out there, you can directly access the data. You can directly update the data, insert, change, delete, which is where all of the WX Manager classes are based on. Okay. In mobile, that's different. You can access local files if you choose to for a hyperfile, locate them locally and edit, change, and delete data, and you can synchronize them to hyperfile SQL also. I'm not a fan of synchronization. I've seen it over the years, how it's developed, and it's got a lot better, don't get me wrong. But if something gets out of sync, it runs into major problems, and you have to rebuild applications and things like this. And when you're dealing with mobile devices and customers out there, unless you're in a controlled business environment, it's really, really hard to get somebody that downloaded it off of Google Play to mess with it, to sit there and go, oh, well, you need to click this button in here and rebuild your file system based upon the master. So it runs into what I consider more maintenance as a possibility versus lack of maintenance. There is nothing wrong with it. It actually works. Okay, but if you do run into a problem, then you're gonna have different issues with it. Part of it is that you always got to understand under a mobile device that you can lose Wi-Fi or cellular connectivity at any time. So you can lose the internet. You can have cellular connectivity, but no Wi-Fi if it's in a roaming area. So you got to keep those things in mind, which means you do have to store, if they're going to use it, something locally. At American Litho, we have about 35 or 40, and we're gaining on scanning devices around there. There are some, used to be some dead spots in the warehouse and stuff for the printing, and we'd have to store the data, when they get back underlined, then we'd send it in, and everybody'd be happy. So the way that we've chosen as a methodology, whether it's the best or fits your needs, is we use Restful Calls. We build a RESTful program in Windev to receive the data from the mobile device, update the data or insert as necessary, and send back any data to the mobile device, and this is all done via JSON. This, in my opinion, is a really simple way to do it because you know that number one, if you can segregate out and solve the problem, but you're still, in essence, using the WAS, the Web Application Server, to manage the data. Whether it be WebDev, Windev, whatever it is, you can use those RESTful programs to manage all the data. One system that we were involved with, that's exactly what they do. They use RESTful programs for everything. The website calls the RESTful and displays the data. It helps. I don't know that you would need to go that far, but it certainly does. So the RESTful side allows us to manage the data, and that's fine. Gives us the greatest control. The mobile device, obviously, we want to manage the data that they are currently working with, but no more than that. So there's a little bit of difference in the way this happens. I created a RTA mobile, which is Racket Tracking Android mobile configuration. This configuration puts us into the mobile environment versus Windows environment. If you have installed Windev 24 first, Windev 24, then as you install mobile, there's an option that says install separately, and also a checkbox that says install inside of Windev 24. I unchecked this separate and told it to just install into 24. That allows me to actually utilize mobile programming inside Windev, and I only have one icon. The same thing with WebDev and Windev mobile both. They're all in here, so I can literally edit screens or let it edit classes that are shared between the devices, shared between things, and things stay together. To me, it's one of the coolest things that's in there. So we're going to end up, before we're done, we're going to have the desktop racket tracker, which we already have. We got an RTA mobile for Android. We're going to have an RTI mobile for iOS. We're going to have a RT REST, which is the RESTful program that handles everything. And then we're going to have an RT web, which will be the web programming for the web service. And it'll all be in here, and we'll be able to jump around and look at different things. It ought to be pretty cool. So anyway, the problem that you have is when you switch these environments, certain things work in one but does not work in the other. Okay, like all the database configurations. None of those will work because we cannot access the Postgres directly from a mobile device. So we have to use a compile directive for that. And the way you do that is you have a greater than or less than symbol, pick the configuration name racket tracker, and what we're going to do now is we're going to take that end and we're going to put it all the way down here. Now, all the errors went away because unless we're in that configuration of racket tracker, none of that code gets executed. They used to have in earlier versions where you had these little insert blocks that you could use. This is much, much cleaner. Much, much cleaner method. Okay? So we do have a couple of things that we're going to need to do in this environment. Number one is that, yes, we still use a class base, and this is the main thing that we're going to talk about. How do you manage the data in this environment versus a desktop or web environment? It's fairly simple. I create a data class, a data manager. That's all it is. It manages all of the data that's on the mobile device. There's one class. That's it. Because I'm not really updating a lot of things. I'm not changing a lot of things, but you can fix up and make things a lot cleaner if you do. Okay? And we're going to do a little bit of experimentation, but we're going to go through that class basis to see how that works, and we're going to set this thing up to where, it will work that way. Now, the thing that we need to have locally on any mobile device is we need to have one file. We need to have one HF file. That's all I use is one. So let's go into the checkout of the analysis, and we're going to create a new custom folder, and that new custom folder is going to be mobile. Now, from that, we're also going to create, because of the way we're doing things, and this is a neat little feature here that you may not know about. I'm going to create a desktop, and I'm going to show you why we create the desktop. I'm going to move all of these things into the desktop directory. Okay, so now they are. Everything's cool. And we're going to create us a new file here. That is HFSQL. And we're going to call this mobile, HF mobile. Okay. Where are we at here? We need to get to, oh, there it is. HF Classic is all I need. And create it. Now, there's the first few things that we're going to need for this. HF Mobile ID is fine, but some of the other fields we need is we need a table name, and that's going to be text. We'll leave it at 50 characters. I really don't do it any more than that. Then we're going to need a ID. We'll take that one out of there. Now, and I'll explain each one of these fields and what they do, okay? Need an action type. And the last field is J data. That's going to be a memo field. Okay? Now, let me explain to you what we're going to do here. We have several tables that's currently in the database. We have, profiles for the customers. We got racket, tracking, different things like this. So we're going to be pulling data from those environments and storing it somewhere. We're not going to pull it every time. So what I'm going to do is periodically we'll go, if there's no records in there for it, we'll go get whatever records they are and put them in, okay, into the system. That will create a record. So let's say we get all the customers as an example. That's going to create one record in here in HF Mobile where the table name equals customer. The ID will be 0. The ID 0 tells me that it is a collection of the database records that's already over there, okay? The action type will be 0 as well, and the J data will be a JSON array of the entire selection of records, everything in JSON there. If you add a customer, the table name would be customer. The ID would be a -1 for the first one, -2 for the second one, -3 for the third one. We use negatives on this side. The action type would be a 1 for insert, 2 for update, 3 for delete. And the J data would hold the record itself that needs to be sent. Now, the only time that you're going to have that in here is if the Wi-Fi is disconnected. If you have Wi-Fi, that record will never end up in here. What it will do is go ahead and go to the Restful program, and when it goes to the Restful program, you'll be able to handle it there. So this is a catch-all for any of the data that you may have that you'll have to deal with, and it'll also store any data that you've already queried. Now, how do you manage that data? It's pretty simple. What we do is in the background, initially I'm going to look in there and see whether or not that there's customers in the table. If there's no customers in the table, I'm going to go ahead and use the Restful and attempt to pull over the customers in order to list them in there as an example. If there's no Wi-Fi, I'm going to pop up and say, hey, at this time we're not able to gather any data. Please check back later. Make sure you're on Wi-Fi or cellular service in order to collect, pull the data. Once it's over here, obviously you want to know changes. Somebody else changes the customer, adds a new customer, things like that. We're going to display our data existingly. We're going to display that. Then we're going to utilize a background process to go fetch it again. And that's what we do is we loop through that and look to see whether it's in the array, has anything changed, and we manage the data that way. It's pretty easy, pretty simple, but it allows it to be responsive to the user, and if they're out of Wi-Fi, they can still see the customer list because it's on their machine. So now we've got that one. We got the HF Mobile. Now, you remember I was saying that there's a little cool feature about the desktop and the mobile by utilizing these sub containers. Let me show you how that works. And this is where the problem runs into, because you don't want to do this, throughout them all or put a bunch of different ones in there. But this is a cool little feature. Hang on just a second here. Let the analysis generate. Okay, I'm going to go back to Racket Tracker to enable all this. This little line of code here on line 20, the H-change connection, that's saying every table that's in the dictionary or the analysis, I want the dbcon, which is the Postgres, to access it. Well, we no longer have that. We have a hyperfile in there as well. So we don't want to do that. What we want to do is leave that one alone. Don't even mess with it. We want to take everything else there. Now, there's two ways to do that. I can do an H-change connection on each different table. I can list out customer, default manager, everyone down the line. Problem is when you have 100 of them, That's a pretty lot of code. Okay? So it's much easier to do what? It is easier to turn around and name the directory, desktop. So if I put desktop here, what that means is that every table that's underneath that subfolder in the analysis will now get changed to dbcon for the connection. Now think about that. If you have a lot of tables and you may have multiple connections, we talk about that. How do you manage multiple connections? I may have a database in Postgres that is working with a database in MS SQL. Well, I want to keep them separate. I want to keep the tables separate. So I put them in those subfolders, and this is how I manage it. I don't have to do each individual table that way. It makes it so much easier, so much easier. This is one of the little tricks that we've got in there. So let's go back to the racket, and we're ready now to create our first class. So we're going to create a data manager class, mobile data manager. Make sure that when you create your classes and things like that, that you name them so you know where they belong. Okay, and we're also going to create subdomains in here, or sub folders in here for this as well. So let's create that class. Usually we need to do this beforehand, but we're going to create this and we'll call this mobile. Now the reason why I don't need to make it iOS versus mobile is because most of the time they're all the same. We're going to use the same classes in both of them. That's not going to change. The code's the same. The only reason I would have anything different is because I need to compile it one way versus the other. Okay, so we got the mobile data manager. So what do we need to do here? Well, let's go to the customer class. Now this class is got all of the data. This has got all the data elements we want. We're going to do a little bit of experiment, and I think that this should work. Since this graying out says it's not part of this configuration, and what we're going to do is we're going to add it to this configuration. You see the configuration here, and I'm just going to check all because we're going to need them in all anyway. Now it's available. Okay? So in here, I can put AAR customer is array of customer. Okay? Same thing with the repair units. Let's make that part of it. AAR repair units is array of repair units. Okay. If you notice that I'm leaving the managers out, because they work with the WX manager class and we don't need that in here. We're not going to use that in here at all. Okay? But there's a couple other things that we need to do. Number one, since we're using Restful Calls, we need to have a URL for it. So I create a REST URL. Is string. And we default that here. rest.wxperts.com. I don't have one right at the moment. We're going to have to create that, but I'm going to put that in there anyway so we know what it is. Now, that gives us the REST URL. That says what we're going to be calling. Then we can start building how do we get the data. Okay? The way we do that is create a new method, customer. And we're going to do fetch customer. And all I'm going to do here is a pretty simple deal. Our request is RESTful request. Request.URL equals REST URL plus / fetch customer. Okay. Understand, understand this much. Whatever the case sensitivity of this is, that is also the same way you have to be case sensitive in the creation of the RESTful. When we get to this point, I'll show you, but it is all case sensitive, anything dealing with that. Okay? Now, the other part that I want on here, okay, is I need one variable, which is going to be the where clause. Because we may not want all of the items. Equals where, let's look at our customer table, because I think we may or may not have active in there, but we need to see. We need to put an active in there. So we're going to put where active equals true. Okay? So we're going to have to add that to the table because we need only the active ones. And then what we can put here now, you got to worry about injection. We'll worry about that on the RESTful side. I'll show you how to deal with injection on the RESTful side to make sure nothing goes wrong, and we'll go from there. So, simple method. If that's all you got, you can do a request method equals ATP get request we want content type equals type mine JSON, and we are then response is REST response equals REST send request. Now, what you're going to get back is a content, and we're going to make some adjustments when we get further along with this. But in essence, we're going to need to mess with the content. So we got a couple of ways to do this, and you're going to think the deserialize would work beautifully. We're going to retest that in 24. I've had some difficulties where I've had to loop through them. So we're going to do what we're going to do is we're going to do the deserialize at this moment, which should work fine. If it does not, then I'll show you how to loop through it. So we got the JSON data is string equals resp.content. Okay. Now this is deserialize to what? We're going to deserialize that to the AAR customer with the buffer of JSON data, and that is going to be PDS JSON. Now, if everything works right, what you'll end up having is an array of whatever customers that were returned inside this array that you can use from there on. So you say, well, I need to update one or I need to insert one. Now here's what I do at this point. The HF file is there. So it's an read-seek first. We're going to go for the file name of HF mobile. The item name that we're going to look at is the table name. And this is where I made a mistake. I got to put a key on that table name. I'm not used to having to do that. So let's go back over here to Racket Tracker, open that up. And let's put a key right here. Key with duplicates. That way we can search on it and everybody be happy. Yes. Yes. Okay, let's go back here. And we're going to look at the table name. And we're looking for customer. As the table name. Okay. If we have that, we need to check that. If H found HF mobile equals false. That means we have no records out there. Then what we need to do there is add the HF mobile, and we're going to put in the JSON data. Well, we got to actually, I'm sorry, we got to fill in the fields. HF mobile dot table name equals customer. Still got to get used to this keyboard. HF mobile JData equals JSON data. HF mobile. Is there anything else I need to fill in? We don't need the action type. We don't need that. We just need those two because ID is going to be blank. Action type is going to be 0. So we're all cool with just those two is all we need to fill in for the whole data. Now we got the else side. Here's where we're just going to change one thing. HF mobile dot JData equals JSON data and H modify. Okay. Now what that's done is gone and collected all of the data and stored it locally as well as filled in my array. I'm happy from there. Okay. In doing so, all right, let's take a look at what we need to do here on a couple of things. I'm going to create another procedure. And what we're going to do is call that fetch customer rest. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to move this stuff here. Let's see what I want to do here. Hang on. Okay, yeah. We're going to put all this down here, and I'll tell you why. We're going to fetch the customers, but we're going to actually do that in the background, the fetch rest. Up here, what we need to do is we still need to do the hread seek, okay? And if it's not found, we're going to go ahead and call fetch customer rest and let it pull everything back and deal with it. And that'll set it all up. If it is found, then what we do here is deserialize that J data the same way. Okay, so let me go back because I did change everything on you, and I apologize in doing so, but we'll handle it this way. No, I want both, yeah. All I need is string. Okay. Then I'm going to HF mobile dot JData and deserialize it. Okay. All right, let's go back over this because I changed things on you in the middle, and sometimes I do that when I look at it and go, it may be more efficient to do it this way. We need to fetch the customers. So we're going to call the fetch customers from the front of the screen so we can have them a list. Well, the first thing we need to do is see whether or not we have any already in the local database. If we have them, then what we're going to do is just deserialize that data right there and boom, show it on the screen and go from there. And later on, we'll do a background fetch for the customer rest below and handle it. If we don't find any, obviously we need to call the rest right then, which is what we're doing. We call it right then, it fills in all the information, and we're off and running again. Okay, so this handles fetching the data from the RESTful program as well as managing the local at that point in time for the fetching of the customer. Now, you know, when we're going to get into here is a little bit more, and I've got about 15 minutes, and then we can deal with a little bit more. So let's do basically an insert. You know, how do we handle an insert in the array? Well, the thing that we do is, number one, we also need a record structure for each one of them here. So we're gonna do a rec customer is customer rec repair units is repair units. Okay, so now we got those two. We're going to do a F4, and we'll call it customer update as an example. In here, we're going to come in with a rec customer that's already is, okay. All right. So now we've got that, and we've got to do something with it. Here we go again with the same type issue. We've got this set up, and what we do at this point is we have a J record is variant. And I'm going to change a couple, 2, 3 things on the J record. Number one is I'm going to say J record equals each field of the customer record. And there's a reason behind this. So we're going to go up here, and we're going to grab all of these fields. We'll come back down here. And we're going to put them all right there. Okay? Do my alt funny stuff. J record dot postal code, all of that is in there, and we are going to then assign them let's get this out here. Oh, well. Command for all of this, and a Control V. Then I'm going to grab all of this, highlight every bit of it, and I'm going to put it out here. Okay. Then I'm also going to put in J record action type. Equals whatever action we're doing on this. Now, why do we do this? Because if we have the whole thing in JSON, all I have to do is send that to the RESTful in JSON, and guess what? It knows what to do with this record when I get it over there. That is, including if this is a, you know, a -1 or whatever it may be, we can handle it from there. So now we go through and do the request is rest request. Request URL equals rest URL plus / let's see, customer update. Okay. Request dot content type equals type mine JSON. Request dot HT. No, it's method. That's what I want. This is the change, HTTP post. Now, you can do the add, put, all of that stuff in there, but I don't. HTTP post handles all three of them, whether I'm doing an add, change, or delete. You know, the school way to do it is that you have a different method for everything that you're doing for it. You'll find out in the real world that's not really the case. So you have all that. Now we need to get the content. Request content equals variant to JSON J record. All right. Then we do the response is rest response equals rest send request. Now, obviously, when we test this whole thing, we need to check on, see what comes back. You know, if response, you know, we got to get the variant for the return of the record. We'll test all that as we go through this, because I still have to build the RESTful program, which will be in our next functionality is what we're going to do. But this kind of handles it. So in the program, if I change the address for an individual or if I add a new customer on the fly in the mobile device, well, guess what? It's going to go over there and do its job. Now, you are going to have to get the response back. It's going to send you back. When we create that, we're going to create a structure for the return that's going to have the status, which is going to be successful or fail. Status message, which will either be successful or it'll be the error that's returned. And then you're going to have the whole record returned back to you. Why to have the whole record returned back to you? Number one, there's a couple of reasons why. If you consistently do that, if there are things over there that you calculate, do all kinds of stuff like that, it brings all that back. Plus, it brings back the valid ID of the record that you just had. Okay? So now what happens is that you can, and let's say here we're going to add response code. But let me show you how we handle this. Once I get this back, what I need to do now is index is int equals array seek. We're going to use the AAR customer. We're going to do an as linear first. We're going to look for the ID, okay? And what we're going to look for is the original ID first. So we're going to look for our customer ID. And that's the reason why we're going to do this. The response is going to come back with a value, and that's what we're going to deal with now, because what we want to do is, now that we found that, we want to put the response in there. So we're going to make the arg customer dot ID equals to the J response dot, this is going to be a variant, ID. Okay? J response is variant equals to variant response.content. Okay? So at this point in time, we do if J response dot status equals successful. We're going to do that. We're going to check to see here if our action type equals EQE add and then we're going to then do an AAR customer NDX equals our customer. If NDX equals is greater than 0 and else array add AR customer our customer. All right, so let's go over this code a little bit. We're going to pass in a record of the customer. That record of the customer is going to have either a brand new record or an updated record. We don't know which. We don't care. We're going to have an action type which is set up to be our equates. Okay? That's going to tell us what's going to go on. So we move it to a variant because it's easy to do a variant to JSON. Okay? You're going to create the REST request. You're going to call whatever RESTful service that you're dealing with that. You're going to send the entire record by doing a variant to JSON in the content. So you got a JSON record over there. So I'm going to show you how that works on the RESTful side on our next session. The HTTP post is telling you your post. That means that the content now is useful. If you do an HTTP GET, the content will give you trouble. So don't do it. The REST response then will send it over there, get whatever response is coming back, and I'm going to move it to another variant called JResponse because I don't know everything exactly that would be in the content. And if that status is successful, I'm going to go search for that ID that we have, whether it be -1 or 23 as a 23rd customer, but I'm going to go find that record. If I find it and it equals add, then I'm going to update the ID with the ID that came back. Okay? And at that point in time, I'm going to then, for the index that's found, I'm going to take that record in the array and update it with the current values that are in my ARG customer. We're done. Okay. If there's other fields you're bringing back, you can update those fields, do what you want to do with them, but basically that's the only thing you need to do. If it is a -1, which means it didn't find the record, well, let's add it because we know it's a new record at that point. Okay. We're still going to need this in this one as well because it's still going to bring back a valid new one. Okay. So if it's not in there, we want the new ID, and then we're going to add it to the customer. That basically takes care of the three things that's going on. Okay. When we come back on the session now, we got to look at one more thing. What do we do if there is no internet? Okay. This is all done differently. We're going to create another little procedure, which is store customer. That's also going to receive the same situation, and I take everything from here down because I'm going to utilize the same thing. The only thing I'm not going to do is actually call the RESTful program. All right. So we got this, and we're going to make the ARG customer here. we're going to take this part out, and this is what we're going to do. We got the HF mobile dot action type equals arg action type. HF mobile dot ID equals the arg customer ID. HF mobile dot table name equals customer. And then you got the HF mobile dot JData equals the variant to JSON. All right. What that does now is store the record locally. And when we do the edit, we'll check if internet available, do this, otherwise do this. Okay? And that allows us now to store it locally. The question we have now is obviously we need to loop through the HF mobile on occasion and update the records that are stored there. We'll do that in our next session as we finish and being able to call things, stuff like this, so we can test all that out. I hope this kind of clarifies a little bit on the mobile. I hope this gives you some insight on how we do the mobile programming. This makes it about as simple as we can make it. You're going to have, depending upon the number of tables you have out there, you're going to have multiple ones. Make sure that you try to keep them together. So if I'm dealing with customer, I got the fetch customer rest, the customer update, and the store customer all together. The next section would be the racket. We're going to have the all four of them together. So that way it's kind of easy to find. You can move the methods around, but you know, I suggest, you know, just leave it as is. This handles all of the data completely on the mobile device. It handles it smoothly, safely, and also it will give you the best user experience based upon being able to fetch things and storing it locally, displaying. If they're out of Wi-Fi, they can still add a customer. They can still change a customer's name. They can do whatever they want to do. The customer's moved or whatever, they can still handle all the situation. And the mobile device will still work. Okay? It will still work. And everything will run properly, and you won't have as much maintenance issues. So, next trip out of this, we're gonna deal with the customers on the RESTful side, so that way you can see how that does, and we'll come back and test this with the new customer, create a screen in the mobile to show the customer information, and go from there. But I wanted to show you this so that way you can understand how that works. Everything else you deal with, the screens here, is the same as in Windev. You still got the array to deal with. You still got the array to display. That's what you want to do. You're going to display the array. The arrays handle everything. We deal with nothing but arrays. We very seldom do direct access. Mobile is the only time I do direct access to a data. Doesn't matter what it is, HF or otherwise. It's the only time I do direct access to a database. Rest of the time it's done through the classes. Okay? Any questions, post them below. Let me know if you have any questions on this. I'll be glad to go over them and try to help you understand each and every one of them. Thank you for being with me, and thank you for your patience. We've had a couple of starts and stops along the way, and hopefully we can do several more of these as quickly as we possibly can, because I need to kind of get it done. So y'all be good or be good at it, and we will catch you next time.